There we go. Bismillah. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's go ahead and we'll just start again since I think I wasn't showing up on the screen before. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Khadija, and I'm really happy to be here with everybody for this special youth webinar. First of all, thank you so much to Jannah Institute for having me here, and also Ustada Atia. Thank you to Dr. Haifa Jazakallah Khairan for letting us be here today. She asked us to pass on her apologies. She's not able to join us today, but we'll go ahead and get started. So, topic of our conversation today is the mothers of the believers, radiallahu anhunna, and lessons that we can learn from some of their stories. So before we even get into the stories that we're going to talk about today, let's actually understand who we are talking about. All right, so who are the mothers of the believers? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because we want to make this interactive, inshallah, or as interactive as possible. All right, so let's go ahead and share that. All right. Thank you guys for being patient. I see we have a couple of viewers here. All right, let me see if we can get this going. All right, and if not, no worries, we'll just continue without it. All right. Okay, bismillah. For some reason, I'm not able to share my screen, but that's okay. We'll just continue with our story. So who are the mothers of the believers? What is this topic that we're actually even talking about? So the term mothers of the believers refers to the wives of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are very, very special to us as Muslims. They have a very special role in our religion, and there are many important lessons that we can take from them. Allah tells us in the Quran, in chapter number 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, in ayah number 6, He tells us that the Prophet ﷺ is closer to the believers than their own selves, which means that whenever it comes down to what I want to do versus what the Prophet ﷺ wants me to do, I should always try to do what the Prophet ﷺ wants me to do. And he has left the best example for us. He's the best role model for all of us. And the ayah continues and tells us that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are like our mothers. They are the mothers for the Muslim community. They're the mothers of the believers, which means that the way that we have a lot of respect and love towards our own mothers, right? We want to have that towards the wives of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as well. We want to honor them in that way. They were very, very important to the mission of the Prophet ﷺ as he was preaching and teaching. And so we definitely want to show them respect, and we want to learn from their lives as well. So inshallah today, we're going to talk about two of the mothers of the believers, Salama radiallahu anha and Habiba radiallahu anha, both very amazing women, very, very amazing role models. Now, before we actually do that, let's set the stage a little bit, right? Because if somebody's just joining us for the first time and isn't even sure who these people are, that's okay, right? We're all here to learn. So let's talk about who these people are, where they were living, what was the context. So again, I apologize. We were going to have some slides on. We'll see if we can get them for Ustada Atia's portion. But for mine, if y'all can bear with me, we'll just go through this without slides, okay? So really quick look at the seerah, or the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right, a few things that we know: that he was born and raised in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. He was living there, he was working there, he was a businessman there, right? He started a family there. And when he was 40 years old, he received the first revelation of the Quran, which means Allah sent down the Quran for the first time to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, he was 40 years old, and this took place in the cave of Hijra. It was in a mountain a little bit on the outskirts of the city of Mecca. And this was a huge moment, all right? Huge moment. And I can say that because today, right, we're sitting here, we're tuning in from all different places, right? We're talking about the Prophet ﷺ. We're talking about Allah. We're going to talk about the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. We're talking about Islam 1400 plus years later, right? We're sitting here, we're having these conversations. And it all started in the cave of Hira when the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. So it was a huge moment, very, very life-changing. It changed the entire course of the world, all right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he receives revelation, and he's given this job by Allah. Allah gives him a very special job that now he has to go and teach people about Allah. All right, he has to tell people that, look, stop worshiping these idols that you're worshiping. Because in Makkah at that time, there were so many idols everywhere. Even the Kaaba was full of idols, which sounds kind of like woe to us, right? Like when we go to the Kaaba and we worship Allah there. But at the time that the Prophet ﷺ was living, people had worshipped, they were worshiping idols, and so the Kaaba also was full of these idols. So the Prophet ﷺ, his job that he was given by Allah was to tell people, don't do this anymore, right? Worship Allah. He's the only one who we should worship, right? He's the one who has given us everything that we have. He's made us who we are, so we should worship Allah. So that was his job. So he starts preaching, he starts teaching, right? And unfortunately, the people in his community, the leaders of his community in Mecca, they don't like it, all right? They do not like what is happening. They did not want this new message of Islam to spread. They did not want people to give up their old ways. So the leaders of Mecca are very upset, all right? And they actually start to make life very difficult for the Prophet ﷺ and for the Muslims. And what happens is a few years after preaching and teaching, things have gotten so bad in Mecca, the city where they are, that the Prophet ﷺ, he decides that he has to send some of his followers to another place because it's just not safe anymore in Mecca. So he sends a group of his followers, his companions, may Allah be pleased with them, he sends them to a place called Habasha, which is in East Africa. And he says, go there, you will be safe. Now, for a while, things seem kind of calmer, but eventually the trouble starts again. And the leaders of Makkah, they continue to create problems. They continue to create problems, all right? Eventually, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions, they have to leave Makkah altogether. So they leave the city, they go to a new city called Medina, and that's where they set up their community. And this moment when the Prophet ﷺ left Makkah and moved to Medina, this is called the Hijra. All right, this moment, super important moment, is called the Hijra. And it took place 13 years after the Prophet ﷺ first received revelation. So just quick recap again, Prophet ﷺ receives revelation when he's 40 years old, the cave of Hira. A couple of years later, a group of Muslims migrate. They go to a place called Habasha. And then a couple of years after that, the whole Muslim community migrates to Medina. All right, now this moment, the Hijra, all right, this is where I want to talk a little bit more about because one of my favorite stories from the whole seerah takes place at this time, all right? Before we do that though, I want to ask our audience here a question because I know we have a bunch of young people tuning in and, even though it's not as interactive because I'm talking at you, hopefully you guys can also think as I'm sharing these thoughts, right? So let me ask you guys a question. Have you ever, had a plan? Right? Have you ever made a plan that, things are going to go a certain way, you're going to do one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and then it doesn't quite work out, right? Maybe one thing doesn't work out, maybe two things don't work out, or maybe the whole plan just doesn't work out. I know that I have been there. I actually, subhanAllah, I'm having one of those moments now, right? Like I planned to have slides for you guys on the screen. Alhamdulillah, it just didn't work out the way I had planned. But sometimes when things don't go as planned, right, we can feel a lot of different feelings, right? We might feel frustrated, we might feel upset, we might feel sad, we might feel scared, right? Sometimes we just have these feelings when things don't go the way that we plan. And we might not know, what do we do next? Like now that this thing that I had planned didn't go as planned, what do I do? And so one of the mothers of the believers, radiallahu anhunna, she also found herself in a situation where things didn't go as planned, okay? And so this is the story that I want to talk a little bit about today. So the individual that I want to speak about, her name is Salama, radiallahu anha. And if you've ever heard her name, feel free to put it in the chat. I know we have a lot of comments going on in the chat box, so feel free, all right? So the individual that we're talking about, Salama, radiallahu anha. All right, she was one of the early Muslims. So a couple of things about her. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started preaching and teaching, she and her husband at that time, whose name was Abu Salama, they had accepted Islam early on. All right, so they were some of the early Muslims. They were listening to the message. They became Muslim. They submitted to Allah, and they were living in Mecca. Now, when the time came to migrate to Habasha, they were a part of the group that went to Habasha. So remember, I mentioned that first migration. So they were a part of that first migration, all right? So they went to Habasha, but they ended up coming back, actually. So they ended up coming back to Mecca, all right? So now they're back in Mecca. They're living their lives. The time comes to migrate to Medina, all right? The Prophet ﷺ gathers everybody and he says, now we're migrating, we're moving to Medina. So Abu Salama, Salama, radiallahu anhum, they get ready, right? They're a little family, they have a baby, they start getting ready. And Salama, radiallahu anha, she actually tells us the story herself. So in her own words, she tells us what happened, okay? So she says that her little family, they're getting ready right? They're packing all of their stuff. They couldn't take a lot of stuff with them because the Hijra, it was not like a vacation kind of a journey, okay? It was very difficult, very stressful. A lot of Muslims had to sneak out of Makkah, actually. So they weren't able to take a lot of stuff with them. But they were able to take a little bit of stuff, all right? So they packed up a little bit of stuff, and Abu Salama, radiallahu anhu, he puts it onto their camel, right? He loads up the camel, kind of like we, put stuff in our trunk if we're traveling by car, right? So he puts stuff on the camel. He helps Salama, radiallahu anha, get up onto the camel. He makes sure that the baby is secure, right? Everybody's ready. He takes the reins of the camel and he starts walking, right? So they're walking. They make it almost out of the city. They're like almost outside of Makkah. And all of a sudden, things stop going the way they planned. All right. So kind of like what we said, a lot of us have been in that situation where sometimes things don't go as planned. So this is what happens to Salama, radiallahu anha. So they're making their way. And all of a sudden, Salama, radiallahu anha, her family shows up. And they did not like what was happening. They did not like the fact that this little family was migrating. And so they show up and they start saying, what are you doing? Where are you going? And they say to Abu Salama, radiallahu anhu, you've been obsessed with Islam and this prophet for too long. And now you're taking our daughter away, right? Because they're her family members. And they're like, that's not going to happen. We're not going to let you take her away. You cannot just take her with you. She's our family member. She belongs to us. She's staying here. So they actually start to get in Abu Salama radiallahu anhu's face. They get in his face. They pin him down. He's trying to hold on to the reins of this camel, but they take it away from him. And they have him down, and they start pulling the reins of the camel away. So they're pulling Salama radiallahu anha away. And I just want us to pause and think about this for a second, right? Because when we look at the seerah or the life of the Prophet ﷺ, it's not just like a history lesson, right? Fact, date. It's actually something that we take lesson from. So I just want us to put ourselves in that situation for a second, right? They had a plan. It's not going the way they planned anymore. And there's a difficult moment that they are in. So Salama radiallahu anha, her family's pulling her away, all right? Now, all of a sudden, the family of Abu Salama radiallahu anhu shows up. And they're also very upset. So they're not happy about this either. But they show up and they say, listen, Abu Salama, he's an adult. We're not going to bother with him. He can do whatever he wants. Salama is your family. They say that to her family. You can take her. But this baby has our family name. So you cannot take this baby. We are taking this baby. We're not letting this baby go with you. So they start fighting also. And they're fighting with everybody. And now they try to snatch the baby away from Salama radiallahu anha. And again, I just want us to picture this for a second. Abu Salama radiallahu anhu, he's pinned to the ground. He's trying to get up. They keep pushing him down. Salama radiallahu anha, she's being taken away by her family. She's screaming, she's crying. And now her baby is being taken away as well. And the baby is crying. It was a really difficult moment in a very difficult situation. And just like that, this little family was separated. So Salama radiallahu anha, she tells us that, what happened after that? Abu Salama radiallahu anhu, he's sitting there. He's trying to figure out what to do, right? His family has just been taken from him. He realizes that there's not much he can do in that moment. So he decides to go forward and go to Medina. All right. He decides, I'm just gonna make my way. He realizes that, there's not much he can do with these families at this time. So he goes to Medina. Salama radiallahu anha, she's with her family and she's not allowed to leave the house. She's just there. They won't let her go. They won't let her see her baby. And she tells us that she spent one whole year like this, that a whole year passed and she was not able to be with her family. And she tells us actually that she cried so much during this time. And I actually think that that's really brave that she shared that, because sometimes I think we feel like we can't really be honest about how we're feeling, right? We feel like we have to hide our feelings, or we feel like if we're sad, we can't tell people that we're sad, but she tells us, she says it in her own words, that she felt sad, she felt how she felt, and that she cried. Now, a year passes. And again, this little family, right, this cute little family, they're separated. Now, at this time, after a year, her relatives, they start to feel bad. They're like, you know what? She's separated from her family. Let's just let her go. So they decide that she can go. They say, you are free to leave. the first thing she does is that she goes to the family of Abu Salama radiallahu anhu and she says, I want my son. Give me my son. So she gets her son. And now she has to figure out how to reunite her family, right? What is she going to do? Abu Salama radiallahu anhu is in Medina. So she realizes, I have to get ready. I have to get an animal. I have to find a camel. I have to get my stuff together. And I have to get to Medina. I have to bring my family back together. All right. And that's exactly what she does. She finds a camel. She packs a little bit of stuff with her, whatever she needs. And she and her baby, they set off alone. And she says that actually. She says that I set out and there was nobody with me except my son. And again, this journey, it was not like it is today, right? Today, we can take a car to Medina from Mecca. We can take a bus. There's a lot of ways to travel that are comfortable and safe. It was not like that at that time. It was very dangerous for a woman and a child to be traveling alone in the desert. But she's like, I have to do it. I have to do what I have to do to reunite my family. So she sets out, all right? Now the story gets a little bit more interesting. So she's on her way. She's traveling. It's just her and her son. And she stops at a rest area. Okay, it was at a place called Tan'im. This was a place where travelers would stop and they would rest for a bit, all right? So she stops there. She's getting some water for her animal, right? Because animals need a break too. They can't just walk all day and all night. So she gets some water for her animal. And while she's there, she sees somebody from Mecca. And this person's name was Uthman bin Talha. Now, at this time, he was not a Muslim, but he does become a Muslim. So we'll say Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu. Okay, but again, at this time, he's not Muslim. So he sees her and he thinks like, that's really interesting. There's this lady here by herself. And he also recognizes her from Mecca. So he goes up to her and he says, where are you going? And she tells him like, I'm going to reunite my family. And he says, who's with you? Like, are you traveling by yourself? Like, what is going on here? And this is the part that I love. Okay, so she says, I am here. Allah is with me and my son. I just have Allah and I have my son. And I love that because it reminds us that no matter what situation we're in, no matter what we're going through, even if we feel super alone, even if we feel super scared, super lost, Allah is always with us. And if we have Allah, then we have everything we need and we're always going to be okay. And I love that she reminds us of this. So she tells him, I am on my way. It's me and Allah, and I'm going to continue until I reunite my family. And he actually tells her, he says, look, can I travel with you? Like, I just don't feel good about leaving you alone to travel in the desert. Like, can I just kind of travel with you and make sure you get to your destination safely? And she accepts it. And she actually says about Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu that he was one of the most honorable people from Mecca because he was so polite. He was so respectful. He went out of his way to make sure that she felt comfortable, to make sure that she felt like she had enough privacy. So one thing is, you know, like when they were traveling, sometimes they'd have to get off of the animal, right, to rest. They'd have to get back onto the animal, right? So imagine for her, she's traveling, and as she's kind of getting on and off the camel, you know, sometimes you have to shift your clothes a little bit. Maybe she didn't feel comfortable doing that in front of this person who obviously she's not related to. So he would actually do this really nice thing where he would, you know, stop the camel, and then he'd make sure the camel wasn't going to move. He'd turn around and walk away so that she could get off very comfortably. And then he would come back. Just make sure that she had that privacy. So she actually really appreciated his character and his integrity. And she says that he was so honorable. So they travel in this way. They make their way. Eventually they reach and she's able to reunite with Abu Salama radiallahu anhu. And one thing I really like about the story is that Uthman bin Talha radiallahu anhu, as soon as he sees that she's with her family, he just turns around and he goes home. He didn't say, oh, I want, you know, you to pay me, or I want you to give me something because I helped you guys. Like, he doesn't want any compensation. He's just like, I'm glad that you made it. And he goes home. And again, a few years after this story takes place, he does become Muslim. Now, how does Salama radiallahu anha actually become one of the mothers of the believers? That is a longer story, and maybe inshallah for another day. But where I wanted to stop today, at least in this story, is I wanted to just share that, you know, Salama radiallahu anha and all of the mothers of the believers, radiallahu anhunna, they were amazing role models. They had so much courage. They had so much conviction, right? If we look at the story of Salama radiallahu anha, right? First of all, she accepted Islam in the early days of Mecca, right? It was not a popular thing to do. And that's courage, right? That took courage. Secondly, she migrated to Habasha first, And then she prepared to migrate to Medina. Again, these migrations were not easy. They were very difficult, but she was willing to do it so that she could go somewhere and practice her faith. And that is courage, right? Even when she faced all of these difficulties while migrating, she knew that Allah was still with her. She had that conviction that Allah is not going to leave me. Everything is going to work out. He is with me, and so everything will be okay. She had that conviction. And she also took the steps necessary to fix her situation when she was able to, right? As soon as her family let her go, she got up and she said, okay, I have to do what I have to do. I have to get my son and I have to get to Medina, right? That's courage too. She set off all by herself, right? And I see that and I think, wow, I want to be like that, right? I want to be courageous like the mothers of the believers. I want to have the conviction of the mothers of the believers. So inshallah, may Allah give us all that courage and all conviction like our mothers. And inshallah, may Allah allow us to meet them in Jannah. With that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Ustada Atia, who is super awesome and has a super cool story prepared for everybody. Again, Jazakallahu khairan for having me. And I do apologize for the tech difficulties that we had in the beginning, sorry. But I will go ahead and turn it over. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Assalamualaikum. Sorry. I forgot. I muted myself. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let me start over. Hold on one second. Can you guys hear me now? Anyone? Oh no. Okay, all right, good. Alhamdulillah, you guys can hear me now. Alhamdulillah. Okay, Bismillah. Sorry, guys. Interesting technical difficulties. I used to have like a mentor that always told me technology is great when it works, right? So Bismillah. So I just wanted to like follow off of what Sister Khadija was saying, right? Like she focused her session on Salama radiallahu anha, and she highlighted like her courage, right? But also her conviction. I want to now talk about Habiba radiallahu anha, who's another mother of the believer, and highlight what she did in terms of conviction, but then also like her courageous aspects also. So what I want you guys to do is if you're in a place, close your eyes and just kind of like listen. Right? So imagine you're the daughter of a leader of your tribe, right? Like the president's daughter or a senator's daughter in our times. And during this time, you're not Muslim and you live a very comfortable life, right? You're well taken care of. You have really good relationships with people, really great education, right? If you're like, still going to school, like you're getting like the best education out there, like the best friends, the best social life, everything, right? And you're super well respected, right? Because your family's well respected, and to you, family is everything, right? And so now the message of Islam comes to you and you submit. You become Muslim because you really like think about the message. You realize, like this is the truth, and like God really is one, and the Prophet ﷺ is the messenger. But by becoming a Muslim, you've opened yourself up to persecution, right? Persecution here is like people like, being mean to you, your friends leaving you, your parents turning on you, your tribes turning their back on you, right? And not only that, but the people that are around you, the people who are Muslim, they're being killed. They're being tortured just for becoming Muslim, just for saying God is one. And basically you're canceled with like this constant like threat of like physical threats around you, this mental anguish and mental like pain of like, like the stress of like your family, like how they're like treating you. And so you're married by this point, and you and your husband at this point decide, you know what, you're going to leave the home that you've always known, the home that you've always grown up in, and move to a place where like the people are different, the culture is different, the language is different, right? It's like moving from like America to Argentina or the UK to like, I don't know, Peru or something like that, right? Like it would be a complete like culture shock for you in terms of like knowing people, setting up like a brand new life. Like, who do you know? Like, for example, like I have no friends in Argentina, right? So like even if I moved to like, Argentina, I'd be like starting my entire life over again versus like, like friends that you might have like in the UK or Australia or America. There's still at least someone that you might know. Here, you don't know anyone, right? And sometimes like you might like feel like that, like if you've had to move houses before, right? Like that stress of like, oh my gosh, I have to make brand new friends. Or if you're going to college or will be going to college soon, what am I like, how am I going to like live by myself or with roommates? How's it going to work? Your mom's not going to be there to like comfort you when you come home from like a bad day of school, for example, or like even like do your laundry or make food, so this is how like these people who migrated, the Sahaba who migrated to Abyssinia felt, right? But alhamdulillah, like you start to establish yourself there, right? You start to develop a sense of community. But like it's hard still, but you've learned how to manage. And soon you end up having a child, a daughter. But like even though you don't have like your mom and dad and like your extended family, like the people you've always grown up with, at least you had your husband, right, to like support you. But then what do you do if suddenly like one day your husband comes home and he's like, hey, I'm not going to be Muslim anymore, and you're just like, what? Like the whole reason we left our family, the whole reason we moved was because we were Muslim, because we believed in God, because we believed God is one, right? And so like when you move to like this new country with your husband, like with a young child, and then he starts like he leaves Islam and he starts doing like, things that just don't align with our values. Like, what do? Right? Do you feel like, oh my God, God hates me, God's punishing me, like how am I going to survive? How are you going to function? How do you show up every day, right? How do you keep believing in Allah after so many different curveballs in your life? And you think like, like sometimes you think to yourself, you're like, well, this idea of like once I like got away from like the persecution that was happening in Mecca, like things would be better, right? It's still hard, but it would still be better. And eventually like you would get to a place where things are way better. But the problem is that like, even after you've kind of sort of adjusted to this new country, the fact that your husband left your religion wasn't a part of the plan, right? The fact that he's not a supportive person anymore and you've got a small baby to take care of, like it wasn't part of the plan, but you still have hope with Allah, right? Like maybe just like how Allah turned him away, maybe he'll turn him back, right? But then the next thing you know, like he dies, right? Your husband dies. And now you're all alone in a country with a baby, no husband, no prospects, no family, no job, right? Because this isn't like our times where like, you can just like apply. And I say this like very like easily, right? But sometimes like if you're looking for a job sometimes and you can't find one, it's not just like, oh, just apply. But like we have the tools in our times to keep like trying and keep applying to like jobs and stuff like that. Like what are you going to do in a country where like you don't have like who's going to take care of your baby? How are you going to work? Especially in those times, right? Like it was a lot different culturally, right? So the only thing you have left is like your religion at this point, like your religion with Allah. And you're kind of like hoping and wondering, like, is there any hope left? Where do I find the conviction to go on? And conviction here is like the strength and that belief that no matter what, Allah's going to have my back. No matter how many bad things might happen, like Allah's going to get me through this no matter what, right? And I know we feel like that in all stages of our lives, whether it's like with a hard test, right, at school, like, oh my gosh, like I don't understand like maybe math or English very well. I have a huge test coming up, like how am I going to get through this? Or whether it's like friends, right, like I'm being bullied for wearing hijab, or I'm being bullied because I can't do something that, you know, like other kids are allowed to do, right? Whether it's like partying or, you know, being able to like go for like sleepovers or something like that, right? Like I don't know, like it depends on like what your family culture is, right? Like maybe your parents are like, no, it's better to stay at home, you know, like go hang out with your friends like during, you know, like the daytime and stuff like that, but at night we want you home with me. And then your friends are like, you're so weird, or like we can't do stuff with you and stuff like that, right? And sometimes you're just like, why is like Allah making this so hard, or why is like Islam so hard, right? But that's the thing, that's the beauty of conviction. Like you don't ask yourself, why is Allah making this hard, or why is Allah doing this to you? Allah is doing this for you, right? And I think you have to remember that, right? And so that's what Habiba radiallahu anha, like that's what she like, you know, banks on, that's what she believes in. Like Allah's doing this for her. It's another step closer to Jannah, right? Like all these hardships that she's gone through, it's not like it sucks, right? It's not fun to like go through like pain and hardships and like grief and like losing your whole family. But at the same time, like it's one step closer to Jannah that she's getting to. And so Habiba radiallahu anha, right? Her name is Ramla bint Abi Sufyan. And she was the daughter of Abu Sufyan, who at that point in time was like the leader of the opposition of the Quraysh, right? That's a lot of words, right? So he was basically the person, her dad was the person that was leading like the charge against the Muslims. He was the one who was like, oh, I'm going to oppose the Muslims. And he had all these people rallying against him, right? And so like a lot of times you're like stuck, you're, you know, like I think about her and I try to put myself in her position. Like, what would I have done? You know, like what dua would I have made to Allah, right? But the cool thing about being like Ramla bint Abi Sufyan and aka Habiba radiallahu anha is like after the death of her husband, the Prophet also proposes marriage to her, right? And I mean, like, honestly, like, that's just like the best husband like anyone could ever hope for, ever dream for, right? And so the fact that, like, even though she's in a different country, like, the Prophet's also like proposing marriage to her shows that he hasn't forgotten about them, right? It's not one of those like out of sight, out of mind situations at all. You know, the Prophet also like thinks about them, he makes dua for them. And the fact that he's seen, you know, like someone who used to be like well respected, she is like the daughter of like a leader of, you know, Makkah, like alone with a child, he proposes marriage to her. And Najashi, who is like the leader of Abyssinia at this point, he's like their king, that's a title. He does the nikah for them, right? And Najashi radiallahu anhu became Muslim, right? And so like he does the nikah for her. And when she like moves back to like you know, Medina, because that's where the Prophet ﷺ is by this time, he sends her with 2 boats full of gifts to bring back to the Prophet ﷺ. And I think that's like really cool, right? And so you see that like Abu Sufyan, right, is the dad. And like at this point, like there's another story that highlights the courage of Habiba radiallahu anha. And that's like what she does with her dad, right? And a lot of times, like when we think of our dads, like I feel like there's like 2 different like dads out there, right? The dad that like he'll say yes to whatever because he's just like a really big softie, or like that dad that's like really strict, right? And like kind of scary, right? And so like Abu Sufyan, like he's a leader of Makkah, right? And in order to be a leader, like sometimes, you know, like you have to have like a level of like strictness, right? And so like there's a point in Seerah where Abu Sufyan comes to talk to the Prophet ﷺ, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to go visit my daughter, right? And he says that maybe, you know, like him visiting his daughter, she might help, like, you know, like talk to the Prophet ﷺ better, right? It's like when we go to our mom to like get help for asking our dad to like go and like do something or get something. You're like, you convince your mom first. You're like, Mom, this is why like I need like the new like PS5, right? Even though you just got a PS4, right? That's what your dad's gonna say, right? But you're like, Mom, I need a new PS5. It's faster. It looks better. It has better graphics, blah, blah, blah. And then finally your mom's like, okay, yeah, fine, right? And then when you go to your dad to ask for that same thing, you're just kind of like, you know, at least you've got your mom on your side, right? And so Abu Sufyan comes to his daughter hoping he could just like, you know, get her on his side when he goes and talks to the Prophet, right? So he goes to her house, right? And he's like, is about to sit down on this like mattress, right? And so like that's how, like, you know, like how we have chairs, you know, like sometimes like people like sit on like pillows or something like that. Like you'll see that in like Aladdin or something like that, or even like in like, you know, like Middle Eastern countries or like Asian countries and stuff like that. You'll have like pillows where people sit on the floor, not in a chair itself. So the Prophet used to have like this mattress / pillow that, you know, he used to sit on, right? And so Abu Sufyan radiallahu anhu, because he becomes Muslim eventually, but he's not Muslim at this point, he goes to sit on the mattress, and Habiba radiallahu anha like takes it and just like folds it up and puts it up before he can even sit down. And he goes, I'm not quite sure, child, whether you think that I'm above sitting on your mattress or that it is too good for me to sit on, right? As in, I'm not sure if you're removing this mattress because you think like the mattress is not good enough for me to sit on, or because you think I am not good enough to sit on it, right? And so she responds, this is the mattress of Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And since you are an idolater, right? Like he doesn't worship Allah, he like worships idols, and you're impure, I've removed it. Hence, I do not like you to sit on this mattress of Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And I think that's like a really like courageous thing to say, right? Like if it was our like dad, right? Like I know I wouldn't be able to say this to my dad ever. Like I'd just be like, yeah, like it's just not good enough for you to sit on, is what I would have said, right? Even though like I'm just kind of like, oh no, like you're not, like you've like oppressed us, you've like fought against the Prophet ﷺ, you've led battles against the Prophet ﷺ. I don't think I would have the courage to say that to my dad, right? But Habiba radiallahu anha says it, but she does it so politely and with so much adab and so much respect, right? She's not like our days, like sometimes how like kids are like, Dad, like whatever, like you just don't get me at all, and then like you go and like slam the door, you know, like she does it in a very respectful and kind way, right? She's like, she says it very firmly. She's like, you're not Muslim, you're impure at this point, right? Because an impure doesn't mean like haram or anything like that. Like it just means like, you know, like hasn't become Muslim, like probably isn't in like a good state, like cleanliness wise and stuff like that too, right? Because obviously he traveled from Mecca to Medina, and like Sister Khadija said, like it's not like today where it's just kind of like a 2-hour bus ride or car ride or train ride or whatever. Like you're traveling on your camel and you're dusty and gross and etc., right? But I think like the courage that she has to like stand up to her dad and stand up for her family, like with the Prophet ﷺ and her baby and everything like that, that shows like a lot of like lessons that we can learn, right? And so like when we're getting like bullied, for example, in school, or you know, like sometimes like someone says something mean about like, you know, like your faith, right? Your hijab, your the way you dress, the what you can and cannot eat, right? Or, you know, having to pray 5 times a day, like, oh, well, like, why can't you come out, like, you know, after Maghrib, or even fasting, right? Ramadan just ended, like, why do you have to, like, force yourself to starve all day, right? Like, people say a lot of mean comments, right? But just having that courage to say and speak up and speak your truth of, like, no, I'm Muslim, like, we fast, you know, because I believe in God, we do this. Because I believe in God, you know, I wear hijab, or I dress a certain way, or I don't eat certain things, or I don't do certain things, right? That shows conviction and that shows courage, because you believe like in Allah, in the sense that like you're doing this only for Allah, right? Like if we weren't Muslim, like would we dress in certain ways? Would we eat certain things or not eat certain things, or even fast during Ramadan, right? Like if you weren't Muslim, if you didn't believe and have that like complete yaqeen, that conviction, that like hope, that like, you know, trust in Allah, that like what I'm doing, me fasting, like has like a reward attached to it, like we wouldn't do it, right? And so these are like lessons that we can like learn from Habiba radiallahu anha. Like how can we as like, you know, young people or even older people add, you know, more courage and more conviction into our daily lives. You know, when we're like stuck in like a really hard place, or we're confronted with like a really like mean situation sometimes, right? Like what are we going to do? How do we act? You know, like do we just run away and hide? Do we give up our Islam, right? Or do we like fight for ourselves, you know, stand up for ourselves, stand up for our religion, right? And so this is like one like aspect of like Habiba radiallahu anha's life. Like there's so many more mothers of the believers. There's so many lessons. Like even with Habiba radiallahu anha, you have so many more lessons that you can learn. You know, like honestly, it's like one of those topics where you can literally talk for hours and hours. But you know, we just want to share like one little small snippet of her life. And so, you know, I really hope that you can join us, me, Ustada K-Bar, Ustada Khadija. She goes by K-Bar also. So we're doing like different like, you know, classes for like different students at various levels, right? So we've got like prophetic stories of the Quran for our group that is like 5 to 8 years old. You know, we're like, that will be a class with me. We're going to go through like this really cool book. And then we're going to like learn du'as, and we're going to just like, you know, like have a lot of fun, you know, like learning stories of like the prophets and the stories that are in the Quran, right? And then we're going to do a seerah for younger girls, which is from age 9 to 12 years old. Sorry, I couldn't see. I forgot what the age was. And that will also be a class with me. And we're going to go through this really amazing book, When the Moon Split. And we're going to talk about not just like what happened, right? Like Ustada Khadija said, it's not just about facts. It's not about information. It's about taking like lessons of the seerah that you can impart, like, you know, implement in your life. And I think that's like, as you grow older, like it doesn't matter how many times you've done seerah. Like I do seerah like once a year, you know, with our teachers. And the thing is, like, each time you do it, you learn something else. You learn something different because you're in a different stage in your life every time. So something that you learned, like, maybe before makes more sense now, right? It hits you in a totally different way, or, you know, it speaks to you in a different way. So we're going to be doing that for seerah for younger girls. And then you're going to have like seerah, we have seerah for older girls, which is age 13 through 17. And Ustada Khadija, like, you should, like, if you haven't taken a class with her, like, everyone should do seerah with her. You know, she's like amazing, mashallah. Like, she really makes you love not only the Prophet ﷺ, but also like you learn how to like feel what he's feeling, and cry when he's crying, and laugh when he's laughing, right? And struggle and like support him, right? Like honestly, like learning seerah so many times, like I'm just, you know, I just want like a hug from the Prophet ﷺ, you know, in Jannah. You know, inshallah, we won't have like boy-girl like gender issues or anything like that. But I just, you know, like I want to hug the Prophet ﷺ. I want to hug the Sahaba. I want to hug the mothers of the believers, because you learn about seerah and you learn how hard each one of them fought, so we can be sitting here today, so we can be Muslim today, right? So we can be worshiping Allah the way Allah should be worshipped. And then the last class that we have for girls is an emotional intelligence class, and that is also for girls who are 13 to 21. And like these days, I think we learn a lot about like emotional intelligence, and we've like learned to like talk more about our feelings and stuff like that these days. But like, what is emotional intelligence, right? Like we talk about like book smart all the time, you know, like you're good at math and you're good at science, or you can read well. But what about emotionally? You know, like when someone is like maybe struggling to wear hijab, or someone maybe struggling to pray, or struggling to like do something, are you just like, haram, like this is how you have to do it? Or are you like, oh, let me go befriend that person and see you know, like be a friend to them. Maybe that's what they need, you know? So like you're going to learn about emotional intelligence, you know, and obviously like everything goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. So like you're going to probably have stories about like how the Prophet ﷺ acted in certain ways and how he responded to certain things, even though it's hard, or like how he responded to bullies. So inshallah, those are my slides. But we're really, really hoping that you guys can come join us. And we're just like super excited for like this new batch of students. You know, inshallah, like everyone will benefit. You guys will have like the cool thing about Jannah Institute is we've got like smaller classes. So like, you know, you get to know your classmates a whole lot better. So inshallah, like if anyone has questions or comments, Sadak Kaber, are you back here?
Yes, I'm here.
There, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I just kept.
No, I loved it. I loved it. I mean, I love hearing Ustadha Atiya talk about the seerah for sure. And I'm really excited to see the teenage girls, at least in my class, inshallah. And I'm super excited for people to take all of these amazing classes. Yeah, if there's any questions, or if not.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like going through all the comments right now. Did you see any like comments or questions?
Let's see.
Oh, I like this one comment, and I think this was related to when Salama was like in the desert and like the Sahaba came, and he's like, that's what chivalry is called. Like, I really like that because that's something like we forget in our times nowadays, right? Like opening the door for like people, or like helping someone load their groceries, or even like when your mom comes home with like groceries, are you just kind of like, I'm still in the middle of my game, right? Or are you like, let me just pause wherever I am and let me go help her? You know, like these are like lessons that we can like implement from the seerah in our lives.
Absolutely, like learning from each of the people in the seerah, you know, the Prophet and his companions, you know, just how to be better people and do the right thing. I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing, the person who commented. Okay, great question here. Which days of the week are the classes? So all of the information is on our website, all right, jannahinstitute.com. The days, the times, all of the information is up there. Let's see. Sada Atia, your class is on Sundays. My class is also on Sundays. And then I believe Ustada Hosai's class on emotional intelligence is on Wednesdays. But thank you. We have the link here. So inshallah, you can find all of the class information there. Awesome.
So does anyone have any like questions, or would you recommend this class to new Muslims? I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree. I think learning about the Prophet ﷺ is something that every person should know. And I personally, that's how I started learning about Islamic studies, is I learned the seerah first, and it was super life-changing. So I would definitely suggest the class.
And like the good thing is we like translate a lot of words, so it's not like, and everything's in English, you know, so like inshallah it shouldn't be like any issue, but you know, sign up.
Any other questions, concerns, reflections? Feel free to share any thoughts. We love asking for student reflections too. Ustadha Ati and we've worked together for a couple of different classes, so we get really excited to hear from students and hear what people are thinking.
We also like to play like games in our class.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's always like, that's really fun with the kids. We play like these scavenger hunt games where it's like, go find something that starts with the letter B, you know, or
I don't think I have anything.
Our Jannah dreams. We've got like so many like Jannah goals and dreams. Like, you know, what kind of food would you like in Jannah? So that always like helps get us thinking, but also like the kids
absolutely.
thinking too.
All the things we want in Jannah, inshallah.
Yes, I want my cat to talk, like
Me
I
too.
want her to be like really big, but also like speak to me.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
but I want her to meow also back to me. So like just like I meow to her, even though I can speak, I want her to meow at me, but also talk back to me.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. I want my cat to talk in Jannah. I want to be able to fly around in Jannah. I know that we have some youth who are watching this. Okay, so if anybody has any Jannah dreams, feel free to put them in. I want to be able to eat as much candy as I want without my teeth going bad, which they won't in Jannah.
I want a samosa tree now that we're talking about food, because I want like different flavors of samosas, and like in Jeddah there's no like issue of like, oh, like it's fried food and it's not good for you, but I want like savory and sweet. So I want like chocolate samosas and like raspberry samosas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean it's Jeddah, right? Like
Yeah, you
it,
can have whatever you
make it
want.
happen.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, I see somebody here saying, Anissa saying, I want my cat to talk also. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Great conversation, right?
Exactly.
That would be awesome. I think I also want in Jannah, I want to just be able to like sit near the Prophet and like hear the seerah, but from his perspective, like have him go through the seerah. Because we go through it, we read it, we study it, but I want him to tell his story. And I would love to be there. And all of the prophets. I would definitely love to be there for that.
See, I kind of want to watch their lives like on a TV screen, like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
giant TV screen in the sky, right?
yeah.
But then I also want to be able to like go to like Musa al-Islam, right? Like Musa al-Islam, and be like, so when like Bani Israel made you go back and like ask about that cow like a million times, like what did you really want to say, right? Because he's always like super nice. He's like, okay, fine, I'll go ask Allah what color it is and what age it has to be and like what kind of cow and all this other stuff. But I don't know, like I feel like if I had to go every time like someone asked like a mean question, like they were doing this mockingly, right? Like to
Mm.
tease him. And so if I had to like go and climb like a mountain every time to ask Allah this question, at some point I just feel like, just get a cow, I need a cow, right? But he doesn't. Like he's just like, okay, let me go
Yeah.
ask. But I want to be like, what did you really want to say?
Yeah, honestly, all of the prophets, they were so patient with their people. It's definitely a reminder for me. Oh, let's see. Somebody has commented, I want an ice rink in my house in Jannah.
Ooh.
I should learn how to ice skate. I don't actually know how to do that, but I will come to your house and visit you and skate in your Jannah ice rink.
What about like an ice rink, but it's made out of fire and you can skate on it? Because it's
So,
Jannah,
like a cold
right?
fire rink?
I don't know. Like it's
That's
set of
pretty cool.
ice and
Why not?
fire, right?
Why
Like,
not? That would be awesome. So yeah, anybody who's listening to us, this is how Salati and I, we really like to share Jannah dreams in class. All right. So come hang out with us this summer, inshallah.
and like share with us your Jannah dreams
Yeah,
and
absolutely. What
goals.
you want in Jannah, all right, what you want to talk to the prophets about. We love thinking about these kinds of things. So yeah, any other questions, concerns? So actually, okay, maybe we should just mention for our seerah classes, we're not going through the whole seerah. We're actually going to be going through a part of the Meccan portion of the seerah. So if you guys remember, we talked about the Hijra, how the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina. So we're not talking about the Medinan part after Hijra just yet. We're looking at the first part because there's so much to go through and we don't want to rush through and squeeze it all in there. So inshallah, we're going to be taking our time and going through the Meccan period.
Because it's really fun to like go slower so you can kind of like feel all these emotions. And like I don't know, like going through seerah, it's kind of like you get to meet all these like different sahabas. It's like I don't know, like for me, like celebrity culture isn't a thing. Like I think I would fangirl over like meeting like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu or Umar radiallahu anhu, and I just want to like high five Umar radiallahu anhu in Jannah. Like that's like a goal, or like fist bump him because he's like that cool. But then with like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, you just like give him a bear hug because he's like a dad, right? Like I don't know. Like these are like
I
goals.
get it. I want to meet Khadija radiallahu anha and just be like, I am named after you. Can I follow you around forever? I think that's really just what I want.
Ooh, I want like a fancy tea party with her. Like a super like like one of those like super fancy like Downton Abbey British tea parties, but
Yeah.
just me and her, and I'll be like, yes.
Okay.
Because we're friends. We're friends. Okay. Yes. You're cool. You guys can come too, inshallah, if you want.
That would be awesome, especially like in her house, because we know that the Prophet ﷺ told us that her house in Jannah is beautiful. It's carved inside of a pearl. And so I would definitely want to visit her house and be there for that. I would love that.
I would low-key want like a tour of her place and be
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I want a
can you
tour.
like show us around? I've thought about this house so much.
I agree with you. Oh, let's see. Somebody's asking, can we share a reflection? That's a great question. About any specific topic? So I mean, I love the seerah. I think this subject is my favorite subject. I think it changed my life personally. Just learning about the Prophet ﷺ's life changed mine because I saw how amazing he was and how amazing his character was. Like, I didn't know that when I was younger. I just thought he's this person that we should listen to, right? But I didn't know why we should listen to him. I didn't know why I should care, right? I was told like, oh, you should love the Prophet ﷺ. But it's really hard to love somebody that you don't know. And so getting to know him and seeing like what he went through in every single situation and how we can also follow that and how we have guidance from him in everything, it was completely life-changing. Like all I want is to meet the Prophet ﷺ in Jannah and hang out with him. It's a beautiful, beautiful journey to go through his life.
I think for me, one cool reflection, and this is for like the younger kids class that I'm doing, is just the prophet stories. Like each prophet went through such like different like issues, right? And so a lot of times we feel like, oh, maybe like our parents don't understand what we're going through, right? Or maybe our friends don't understand, or our teachers. But one thing I've learned is like the prophets would understand because like they've gone through it, right? The prophets also either has gone through it, or like the prophet alayhi salam, like as a group, like someone's gone through something, whether it's like you're super sick or like hard family, or you know, like people making fun of you, or you know, like going through like everyone expecting you to do something and then, like, following a different path, right? Like there's just, I don't know, there's always like someone in either seerah or the prophet stories where you're just like, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like really powerful.
Yeah, I feel like it's like just so merciful from Allah that he gave us so many different role models to look towards no matter what situation we're in. I agree. I love the prophet stories. Do you have a favorite prophet story, Salah Atia?
Oh, that's
apart from the seerah. Apart from the seerah.
Apart from the seerah. I think Yunus alayhi salam and the whale, just knowing like never to give up. Even when you make a mistake and you're just kind of like you rushed a little too much, right? Because he left before he got the permission from Allah to leave the people. Like Allah still forgave him, you know? Even and the thing is like you think about like being stuck in that belly of the whale, and like I don't know, I kind of think of like Pinocchio, right? But if you actually think about it, like it's not Pinocchio. Like it's a lot scarier than what Pinocchio is, right? Like he was on a boat, Pinocchio, but like you're kind of like being digested in a whale, right? Like think of like the acid and the pain and like how afraid you are and like all this like feelings, and then just like you make dua to Allah, and like Allah not only like spits you out of the whale, but he like heals you with that water that like washes over him and stuff like that. Like, and then you go back to your people, and like not only do they all become like, you know, like I guess Muslim, or like, you know, like they submit to Allah, right? But like Allah isn't mad at you either for just leaving early. I think that's just, there's so many lessons and like love from like Allah. Like it really shows Allah's love in so many different ways.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Oh, we have a question here. I struggle to take notes during class. Will you be giving notes? Yeah, for sure. So we have a book that, of course, every student will get. And then we also do have slides, and we will have those notes for students because we definitely want people to just listen and like benefit and talk with us. We don't want anybody to feel stressed about taking notes. So we'll have everything, inshallah. Awesome. I think we're almost done. We have like about a minute left. If anybody has any other questions or any other reflections, last chance to put in your Jannah dream right there. All right. I see Sister Amina says patience is key. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I love it. So yeah, inshallah, as Sada Atia mentioned, we are having an awesome summer lineup of classes. We hope to see you guys in our classes. And if you guys have any questions, you can visit the website, jannahinstitute.com. So I guess with that, we'll go ahead and end it. Thank you guys again for joining us today. May Allah accept from everybody who put this program together and allow all of us to follow in the example of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Ameen. Jazakallah khairan. And hopefully we'll see you in class this summer. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum.